Have you ever woken up in a cold sweat, heart racing, trying to escape a nightmare that felt too real? Studies say that nearly 80% of people experience nightmares at least once a month. Some say it's just the mind playing tricks. Others believe nightmares can be something more, something darker. Tonight, the line between dream and reality will blur as the scariest stories unfold. Stories that might just haunt your dreams long after the screen goes black. It all began on a cold October night. Mark, a regular guy who loved scary movies, but never really believed in ghosts, decided to gather a few horror stories for his podcast. He thought it would be fun, a good way to entertain people. He didn't know he would soon face a fear he couldn't laugh off. Mark found stories buried deep in the internet, tales too disturbing to be just fiction. He warned himself they were just stories, but a part of him, the small voice we all try to ignore, whispered otherwise. One story was about a girl named Sarah. She had moved into a small, cheap apartment on the edge of town. Everything seemed fine until she noticed her bathroom mirror would fog up every night, even when she hadn't used any hot water. One night, curious and a little annoyed, she wiped the fog away and saw writing on the mirror that wasn't there before. It said, "I'm waiting." Terrified, she moved out the very next day. But every time she looked into a mirror, no matter where she was, the words would appear again. No matter how many times she moved, how many mirrors she smashed, the message always came back. Clearer, sharper, more demanding. Mark shivered as he read the next story. This one about a boy named James. James lived in a small town where kids often went missing. One night, while lying in bed, James heard scratching at his window. He lived on the second floor, so it didn't make sense. When he finally got the courage to peek, he saw a pale face pressed against the glass, smiling too, widely, its eyes black like the bottom of a deep well. James screamed for his parents, but when they rushed into the room, the window was clean, untouched. They said it was just a bad dream. James wanted to believe them. But the next morning, the local news reported that another child had gone missing from his neighborhood. James never forgot that face. By now, Mark could feel his heart thumping harder in his chest, but he kept reading. He came across another story, this one even darker. A woman named Ellie loved visiting old bookstores. In one, she found a strange, black book with no title. Curious, she bought it. That night, she decided to read it. But the pages weren't full of words. They were full of names. As she flipped through them, she saw her own name written in red ink on the last page. A knock came at her door just as she closed the book. She never opened the door, but she still heard someone, or something, breathing heavily on the other side, whispering her name over and over again until sunrise. When she finally dared to open the door, there was no one there, only a trail of black footprints leading away into the woods behind her house. Mark thought he was tough. He had always laughed at ghost stories. But as he sat there alone, reading about these things that happened to people just like him, he felt the air around him grow colder. His hands were sweaty, and every small noise made him jump. Still, he pushed forward. He wanted to find the scariest story of all, the one that would leave his listeners wide-eyed in terror. He found it. It was a story that didn't seem like a story at all. It was more like a warning. It talked about a cursed broadcast, a voice recording so terrifying that anyone who listened to it would start hearing whispering in the dark when they were alone. It always started with small things. Hearing your name when no one was there, catching a glimpse of something moving in the corner of your eye. But it got worse. Much worse. Those who listened too long said they saw shadowy figures standing at the foot of their bed at night, watching silently. Some even claimed they woke up with strange marks on their bodies, scratches, bruises, or bite marks. And if you ever dared to speak to the figures, to ask what they wanted, you would disappear without a trace, just like those kids in James's story. Mark thought it was nonsense. But still, he hesitated. He had found a link to the supposed recording. He stared at it, finger hovering over the play button. Maybe it was just a joke. Maybe it was all fake. Or maybe, just maybe, it was real. His heart hammered against his ribs as he made his choice. He hit play. The recording started with static. Then a low, broken voice began to speak, too distorted to understand. Mark laughed nervously, feeling foolish. But as the voice continued, he realized it wasn't speaking English, or any language he knew. Yet somehow he understood it. It was calling his name. It was telling him to look behind him. Mark froze. He didn't want to turn around. His body screamed to stay still. But the voice grew louder, angrier. Slowly, Mark turned his head to glance. Behind him, there was nothing there. He let out a shaky laugh and turned back to his screen, and that's when he saw it. In the reflection of his monitor, just behind his shoulder, was a dark figure, too tall, too thin, its head tilting at an impossible angle, its hands long and clawed. The last thing Mark heard before everything went black was his own name, whispered right into his ear, close enough that he could feel the icy breath on his skin, and Mark was never seen again. The police found his apartment empty, his laptop still playing the strange recording on a loop. Some say, if you listen closely late at night, you can still hear him whispering through the static, calling out for help from the other side. Tonight, as you lay in bed, remember the stories you heard. Remember that fear is not always imagined. Sometimes it's real. Sometimes it's right there in the room with you. Which story haunted you the most? Comment below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that will leave your heart pounding and your lights on all night long. A small town called Gray Hollow was known for its thick forests, endless fog, and a sense of stillness that never quite felt right. People there lived simple lives, keeping to themselves, especially after dark. They spoke little about the past, but if you stayed long enough, you'd hear whispers about the old house on Willow Lane, a house where nightmares became real. It all started when Emily, a young woman new to Gray Hollow, rented the old house. She had found it online for a price so low it seemed too good to be true. She thought she had hit the jackpot, a whole house to herself, far from the noise of the city. But when she moved in, the townspeople only watched her silently, their eyes filled with something between fear and pity. On her first night, Emily noticed strange things. The air inside the house was freezing cold, no matter how high she turned the heater. Shadows moved where they shouldn't. The floors creaked even when she stood still. At first, she told herself it was just the house settling. Old places made strange noises, she thought. But then the dreams began. In her dreams, Emily would wake up in her bed to find a tall, faceless figure standing in the corner of her room. It never moved. It only stared. Every night, the figure stood a little closer. One night, it was at the foot of her bed. Another, it was leaning over her, its invisible eyes burning into her skin. Emily woke up screaming more times than she could count. Drenched in sweat, heart racing like a drum in her ears, she tried everything. Sleeping pills, nightlights, even prayers whispered into the dark. But nothing stopped the dreams. Worse, she started seeing the figure even while awake, in reflections, in windows, in her peripheral vision. She once caught it staring at her from the mirror above her bathroom sink. When she turned around, there was nothing there. But the reflection lingered a moment longer, smiling. Desperate, Emily spoke to an old woman at the local store. The woman looked at her with tired eyes and said, "The house chooses people. Once it knows your fear, it never lets go." Emily thought about moving out. She packed her bags one night, ready to leave the cursed house behind. But when she tried to open the front door, it wouldn't budge. She tried the windows, nailed shut from the outside. Her phone had no signal. She was trapped. That night was the worst. Emily woke up to total darkness. Even the nightlight by her bed had gone out. She felt a heavy pressure on her chest, like someone was sitting on her, stealing the air from her lungs. She couldn't scream. She couldn't move. In the darkness, she heard breathing, slow, heavy, right by her ear. Then, a voice, dry and raspy, whispered, "You can't leave. You belong to us now." Emily forced herself to move, finally gasping for air. She grabbed her flashlight and shone it around the room. At first, she saw nothing but dust and old furniture. But when she pointed the beam toward the closet, she saw the door slowly creaking open by itself. From the gap, two pale hands gripped the wood, pulling it wider, inch by inch. She ran, through the hallways, down the stairs, pounding on the walls, screaming for help. But the house twisted and turned around her. Hallways she didn't recognize appeared. Doors led to brick walls. She realized the house was alive, and it wanted her lost inside it forever. Finally, she stumbled into the basement. It smelled of rot and mold. In the corner, she saw a group of figures standing together, their heads tilted unnaturally, their arms too long, too thin. They whispered to her, voices blending together into a terrible chant, calling her name over and over. In the middle of the figures was a mirror. Not just any mirror, a giant, cracked one, with black mist swirling inside it. Emily was drawn to it, as if invisible hands were pushing her forward. She fought against it, clawing at the floor, but it was useless. The last thing she saw before she was pulled into the mirror was her own reflection, grinning at her with hollow, empty eyes. The next morning, the house on Willow Lane looked just the same, quiet, still, abandoned. Except now, if you dared to look through the dusty windows, you might see a girl inside, wandering the halls with a lost, empty look in her eyes. The townspeople said nothing. They knew it was only a matter of time before another stranger came to town, looking for a cheap house and a fresh start. The house would be ready. It was always hungry, and sometimes late at night, if you listen closely, you can hear Emily's voice whispering through the cracks of the old wood, begging for someone to wake her up from the nightmare that never ends. So, tonight, when you lie in bed and the darkness feels a little too heavy, and you think you see something moving in the corner of your room, don't be too quick to brush it off. Maybe it's just your imagination, or maybe, just maybe, the house on Willow Lane has found you too. Which part of Emily's story made your heart race the most? Tell us in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe if you want more stories that will leave you sleeping with the lights on. Mia heard the knocking again. 3 soft taps against her bedroom window. She lived on the 3rd floor. She pulled the blanket over her head, her heart hammering in her chest. Maybe it was the wind. Maybe she had imagined it. But deep down, Mia knew the truth. This was the 3rd night it had happened. Always at 3:03 a.m., always those 3 gentle knocks. The first night, she'd gotten up, peeked through the curtains and seen nothing. The second night, she hadn't dared to move. Now, on the 3rd night, the knocking came again. Patient, careful, like whatever was out there knew she was awake and waiting for her to react. Morning couldn't come fast enough. When the sun finally lit up the sky, Mia checked outside. No footprints, no scratches, no sign of anyone. Her parents thought she was just stressed. Her friends laughed it off, saying she probably dreamt it. But Mia knew she hadn't dreamed. That night, she stayed awake with a flashlight and her phone ready. She promised herself she would record it, prove to everyone she wasn't crazy. At 3:03 a.m., the knocks came. 3 slow, deliberate taps. She flicked on the flashlight and pulled the curtain aside. Her breath caught in her throat. A pale face stared back at her, pressed against the glass. The skin was cracked like old paper, the eyes hollow and black, the mouth twisted into a grin too wide for any human. Mia screamed and stumbled back, dropping her phone. By the time her parents rushed in, the face was gone. Her parents searched the yard, called the police. They found nothing. No ladder, no footprints, no sign anyone had ever been there. The police said it was probably a prank, someone trying to scare her. Mia wanted to believe them, but in her heart she knew it wasn't a prank. The thing outside her window wasn't human. The next day, Mia didn't want to go home after school. She stayed late at the library, wandering the horror section. She found an old book about local legends. One story made her blood run cold. It spoke about a spirit called the Watcher, a creature that chose its victims carefully, visiting them at 3:03 a.m., knocking 3 times. Each visit, it came closer. And on the 4th night, it got inside. Mia slammed the book shut. She told herself it was just an old story, but she couldn't stop shaking. She had one more night before the 4th visit. That evening, she begged her parents to let her sleep in their room. They laughed it off, telling her she needed to be brave. They promised to check on her during the night. At midnight, Mia locked her bedroom door, closed the curtains, and sat in bed holding a flashlight. She tried to stay awake, but slowly, sleep crept over her. She jolted awake to silence. Her clock blinked. 3:02 a.m. She held her breath. The room was so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat. 1 minute passed like an eternity. Then came the knocks. 3 slow taps. But this time, not on the window. They came from inside the room. Tap. 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 Mia froze. She stared at her closet door. It stood slightly open. She knew she had closed it before bed. Something was in there, watching her. Tears filled her eyes. She didn't know what to do. If she moved, would it attack? If she stayed still, would it crawl out anyway? Slowly, she grabbed her flashlight and pointed it toward the closet. Her hand trembled so badly the light shook. She could see only darkness behind the door. Then a hand reached out. Thin, pale fingers with black, cracked nails curled around the edge of the closet door. A head followed, hairless, twisted, with that same too-wide grin. Mia screamed and ran for the door. She fumbled with the lock, hearing the creature slithering out of the closet, dragging itself across the floor toward her. Finally, she wrenched the door open and sprinted down the hallway to her parents' room. She banged on the door, screaming for them to let her in. No answer. She pushed the door open and found the room empty. The bed was untouched. Her parents were gone. Mia backed away, panic clawing at her chest. She turned to run down the stairs and saw the creature standing at the bottom, grinning up at her, arms wide as if waiting for a hug. She stumbled back into her parents' room and slammed the door. She pushed the dresser in front of it and hid in the closet, trying to slow her breathing, trying not to make a sound. Outside, she heard soft footsteps climbing the stairs, then the sound of the dresser scraping against the floor as someone pushed it aside. The door creaked open. Silence. Mia held her breath. Then, close to the closet, she heard breathing, wet, heavy breathing. A fingernail tapped, lightly against the closet door, again and again, like it was waiting for her to answer. She squeezed her eyes shut, praying it would go away. After a long moment, the tapping stopped. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. She didn't know. Finally, light began to creep through the cracks of the closet door. Morning. She opened the closet slowly and peeked out. The room was empty. No sign of the creature. The house was silent. She ran downstairs, hoping to find her parents. Instead, she found 2 things. Her parents' phones sitting on the kitchen counter and a message scrawled across the wall in what looked like blood. It read, "You belong to me now." The police never found her parents. No one could explain their sudden disappearance or the writing on the wall. Mia was sent to live with an aunt in another town. But sometimes, late at night, Mia still wakes up at exactly 3:03 a.m. And somewhere, in the dark corners of the room, she swears she can hear it breathing, still waiting for her to open the door. Jay didn't believe in ghosts, not until the night he moved into the old apartment at the edge of town. The place was cheap, too cheap, but Jay was desperate. A college dropout with no job and barely any savings, he couldn't be picky. The landlord gave him the keys without even asking for a deposit. Just smiled weirdly and said, "You'll have company." Jay laughed it off. Company? Sure, maybe a mouse or two. But that first night, the company showed up. It started at 2 a.m. A loud knock at the door. Jay sat up in bed, heart racing. He hadn't given anyone his new address. Maybe it was a mistake. He stayed quiet. Another knock, louder this time. Then, a voice, low and scratchy. "Let me in." Jay's blood turned cold. He crept to the door and peeked through the peephole. No one was there. He stepped back, and the door rattled violently, like someone was trying to tear it off its hinges. Jay shouted, "Go away!" But the noise just stopped. Silence. Shaking, he checked the locks 3 times before crawling back to bed. Maybe some drunk person. Maybe a bad dream. He finally fell asleep. At 3 a.m., Jay woke up to breathing, not his own. Heavy, wet breathing right next to his ear. He jumped out of bed, spinning around. No one there. But he could still hear it. A slow, horrible rasping sound. He flicked on the lights. Empty room. But when he looked at the mirror, his heart dropped. In the reflection, a tall, twisted figure stood behind him, grinning. But when he turned, nothing. Jay didn't sleep the rest of the night. In the morning, he packed his bags. He didn't care about the money. He was ready to leave. But when he grabbed the doorknob, it burned his hand. He yelped and looked down. Carved into the metal were 3 words, "You're staying." He stumbled back, gasping. His phone was dead. The windows wouldn't open. It felt like the apartment itself had sealed shut. Trapped. As night fell, the temperature dropped. His breath misted in the air. Whispers slithered through the apartment, calling his name over and over. Jay. 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 Furniture moved on its own. Chairs scraped across the floor. The lights flickered, then died. Darkness swallowed everything. He heard footsteps, slow, dragging footsteps, coming down the hallway. Closer. Closer. Then, the bedroom door creaked open. Jay hid under the bed, trembling, biting his hand to stop from screaming. A shape entered the room. Bare feet scraped against the wooden floor. It stopped right beside the bed. Jay squeezed his eyes shut, tears leaking down his face. He felt the mattress sink slightly, like something was sitting on top of it. Then, a hand slid under the bed, groping blindly, fingers brushing against his arm. Jay bolted out, running blindly through the dark apartment. He slammed into a wall, then staggered to the kitchen. He grabbed a knife and backed into a corner, waving it wildly, whispering to himself, "Not real, not real, not real." The lights flickered on for a moment, just long enough for him to see. The figure stood across the room, tall, twisted, head lolling to the side, skin stretched tight over its bones, grinning that awful broken smile. It rushed him. Jay screamed and swung the knife. It went right through the figure, like smoke. He fell to the ground, heart racing so hard he thought it would burst. When he looked up, the creature was gone. But something had changed. The walls. They were breathing, moving in and out, like giant lungs. The whispers grew louder, deafening. He clutched his head, falling to his knees. "You're mine!" He blacked out. When Jay woke up, it was morning. The door was wide open. Sunlight streamed in. His phone buzzed. Full battery. It was like nothing had happened. He didn't waste a second. He ran out, never looking back. Later, at a coffee shop, he overheard two old men talking about the apartment. "Another one?" one said. "How many now?" The other shook his head. "They never last more than a night. Poor souls. That place doesn't want tenants. It wants prisoners." Jay moved to another city, changed his name, tried to forget. But sometimes, late at night, he wakes to the sound of breathing right beside him, and the softest, scratchiest whisper, "You're still mine." Samantha moved into her new house on a rainy afternoon. It was a small, old place with peeling paint and creaky floors, but it was cheap, and she needed a fresh start. As she carried the last box inside, she noticed something odd. A single wooden chair sitting in the middle of the living room, facing the front door. She didn't remember seeing it during the tour. Shrugging it off, she pushed the chair into the corner and went about unpacking. Hours passed. The rain kept falling, tapping against the windows like tiny fingers. When night came, Samantha was exhausted. She barely made it to bed before passing out. At 3:07 a.m., she woke up to a loud thud downstairs. Half asleep, she listened. Silence. Maybe a box had fallen over. She tried to go back to sleep, but kept feeling uneasy, like someone was standing outside her bedroom door, just watching. The next morning, Samantha found the wooden chair back in the center of the living room, exactly how it had been before. She frowned. Maybe she had just imagined moving it. Maybe she was tired. Later that day, while cleaning, she found something tucked under the carpet near the fireplace, a small, dusty notebook. Flipping it open, she saw it was full of strange writings. Over and over, one phrase was scribbled on the pages: "The chair must face the door, always." That night, Samantha decided to move the chair into the garage. She didn't like the way it made her feel, sitting there like it was waiting for something. At 3:07 a.m., she woke up again. This time, she heard footsteps, slow, heavy steps moving through the house. Frozen in bed, Samantha listened as the steps made their way up the stairs, down the hall, stopping right outside her door. The handle jiggled. Samantha held her breath. Then, slowly, the door creaked open. There was no one there. Her heart hammering, Samantha got up, grabbed her phone, and tiptoed down the hall. As she passed the living room, she froze. The chair was back, sitting perfectly in the center of the room, facing the door. She ran back to her bedroom, locked the door, and stayed up until sunrise. The next morning, she checked the garage. The chair she had put there was gone. It didn't make sense. How could it be back without anyone touching it? Samantha thought about leaving. Maybe she should just sell the house and get out. But she told herself she was being silly. Ghost stories were just that, stories. That night, it was hard to sleep. Every creak, every whisper of the wind made her jump. Around midnight, she finally drifted off. At 3:07 a.m., she woke again. But this time, it wasn't a noise that woke her. It was the feeling of being watched. She sat up slowly, her heart racing. The chair was at the foot of her bed, facing her. Samantha screamed and threw the bedside lamp at it, but the chair didn't move. It just sat there like it was alive but patient, waiting. She fled the house that night, not even stopping to grab her things. She drove to a motel on the other side of town and locked herself in. In the morning, she called a moving company. She didn't care about the money she spent buying the house. She just wanted out. The movers agreed to pack up her stuff while she stayed away. But when they arrived at the house, something strange happened. They found the house empty. No furniture, no boxes, nothing. Just a single wooden chair sitting in the center of the living room, facing the door. The movers didn't stay long. They said the air inside the house felt wrong. Too cold, too still, like the house was holding its breath. One of the movers, curious, decided to sit in the chair, just for a second. As soon as he did, the front door slammed shut with a deafening bang. The windows blackened, and the lights exploded. When the others kicked the door down to get him out, the chair was empty, and the mover was gone. Not a trace, not even a shoe left behind. Samantha never went back. She sold the house for almost nothing, to a developer who planned to tear it down. But before the bulldozers arrived, the workers reported seeing someone sitting in the living room. A figure, thin and gray, hunched in the chair, staring at the door with hollow eyes. When the demolition team finally entered, they found the house empty again. Except for the chair. They smashed it to pieces and set the remains on fire right there on the street. Only then did the cold feeling lift. Samantha heard about it from a friend. She was relieved, thinking it was finally over. But a few nights later, in her new apartment, she came home from work to find a package on her doorstep. No name, no return address. Inside was a small piece of blackened wood and a note. The chair must face the door, always.